now my pleasure to invite Brother Dr. Goldstein back on stage to give us the closing comments and to give us the answers to the questions that we have.
Many questions are here. I pray that Swami will give me the wisdom to answer them. How to love God? It's my favorite question. With all your heart. Selfless love is love without desire, love without a need to possess the object of your love, love without a need for recognition, love without a need for reciprocation. It is selfless, it is divine, it is pure. We love, we're enchanted by Swami's divine form. We feel our hearts are deeply moved when we see his divine form. Is this not a form of love? It is a form of love, but it is not sufficient. We are deeply moved to change our lives by Swami's, the eternal truth of Swami's divine message. Is this not love? This also is love, but it is not sufficient. We are deeply inspired by Swami's heroic, unbelievable humanitarian works, and we desire to emulate him. Is this not love? It is love, but it is not sufficient. To love Swami, we must see that Swami represents the highest and noblest and purest and most beautiful part of ourselves. That is selfless love. That is acknowledging the Swami who resides in our own hearts. Swami says Jesus first said, I am the Son of God. Then he said, first he said, I am the servant of God. Then he said, I am the Son of God. And then he said, I and my Father are one. First, he loved God as the servant of a benevolent master. Then he loved God as the son of his divine Father. Then he became one with his Father. Also in Hinduism and amongst the 9 forms of devotion, there is servitude, there is sneha, friendship with God, and then there is merger with God. We should understand what loving God is. Loving God is finding God, being God, who resides in our own hearts. Swami is in our own hearts. That is why he has a heart-to-heart connection with all of us. And that is why there are no intermediaries. And I might add, there are many questions about officers in the organization. That is why no officers have administrative posts. They're here to try to maintain order and be of assistance and serve all of their constituencies. They are not spiritual leaders. No officer in any position is a spiritual leader. We have administrative posts. Hopefully, we are worthy of those posts by striving to be exemplars of Swami's divine teachings, but we are not spiritual guides or advisors in any way, shape, or form. Love God by finding him in your own heart. Swami is there. Devotees from all countries would appreciate. I'm going to go through these very quickly. Some of them are redundant. I'll try to skip those, but I'm going to cover as many as I can because we have a limited period of time. And many we've already not brought because there were so many questions. Devotees from all countries would appreciate an assured opportunity of Swami's darshan when they eventually reach Buddha Party or Whitefield. May we pray to Bhagavan for a day or 2 from each year for a special darshan opportunity as Buddha Purnima and Chinese New Year's. Yes, you may, and yes, we do. Usually, Buddha Purnima, for example, is celebrated in Prashanti Nilaya. On this last year, on behalf of all Buddhist devotees, I prayed to Swami to celebrate Buddha Purnima in Whitefield. Swami said let them celebrate in their own country. Nevertheless, many Buddhists went, and Swami did, in fact, have a function for them. Swami may or may not do that, but obviously that is a worthy event, and you may make that prayer to Swami, and it is the duty of the organization to convey that to Swami and to pray to Swami that he will fulfill the aspirations of his devotees to celebrate these divine days, these divine times in his divine presence. If in a particular family only one person believes in Sai philosophy and teaching, how can he or she convince the rest of the family? He or she may or may not convince the rest of the family, and it is not their duty to convince the rest of their family. It's difficult for a particular devotee to accomplish that, what he or she wants, no support from the family, you can say. Swami is in your heart. You don't require any support from any living thing to love Swami, to exemplify the divine teachings, and to live a spiritual life. Obviously, you should fulfill your dharma in terms of your role in your family, and you can quietly and privately worship Swami in your own hearts. After all, we all have different positions in life. We have professions, we have work, we have positions in our families, and all of them have dharma associated with them. And we have to fulfill those duties. But our primary duty as human beings is to finally become the Lord who resides in our spiritual hearts, because that is who we are. Our primary duty is to seek our identity and seek purpose in our lives. There are many questions about the ladies' attire, about how ladies should dress. Let me tell you a story. One day I went to Swami and I said, Swami, in the Western countries, many devotees are coming to the Sai centers. They come into a Sai center. Many people are sitting on the floor. Men and women are separated. The light is very dim. There is an altar with various deities on the altar, and people are singing songs in a strange language. The people are repelled and they leave the center and never return. And Swami's answer was, and I also said, and they take their shoes off, their feet, and wear their shoes. For this, just to give this answer, I'm wearing my shoes. Swami said, shoes are not important. They may wear their shoes. Sitting on the floor is not important. They may sit in chairs. But the separation of men and women is not Indian culture. That is spirituality. The reasons are spiritual. Now, the relevance of that to dress should be self-evident to all of you. Obviously, when you come into a place where you are going to express your love for Swami or in some way engage in any kind of a function that is spiritual in nature, modesty should prevail. We're here to transcend our attachment to these bodies. We're here to transcend our own attachment to these personalities and these egos, and we're here to practice spirituality, to come closer to our real being. Women, men, all people should dress modestly and not bring attention to these physical bodies. Bhajans are very popular, but study circles are not. If you're spiritual aspirants, then you want to understand Swami's teachings. You all know what Swami has said about study circles. You come together, you focus on a particular teaching or view, and each opinion, each articulation of understanding that any one person in that study circle has is a facet of a diamond. And all together, all of those views coming from all of those hearts, which are all God, are different facets of the one diamond and are necessary in order for the luster to be achieved of that jewel. How can you come and just sing bhajans? You have to understand Swami's teachings. All of these programs are important. All of these, tomorrow I want to talk about spiritual practices and practicing spirituality. Swami has said service is the most important of all of the programs in which we engage. But we have to understand that all of these practices are practices. They're not practicing spirituality. Practicing spirituality is getting up in the morning and opening your eyes and seeing only beauty and good. Spirituality is, well, Swami says, think no evil, think only what is good. See no evil, see only what is good. Speak no evil, speak only what is good. Hear no evil, hear only what is good. That is the way to God. Spirituality is spending every conscious minute of every day focusing on who and what you really are and trying to project that into the world. That is the greatest service, and that is spirituality. All of these practices enable you to focus on that. Singing bhajans, meditation, doing service, all of these things are practices which enable you to achieve a virtuosity of life, a virtuosity of living. That is like using the analogy of a concert musician. A concert musician doesn't just automatically sit down and play a concerto. A concert musician has practiced hours after hour, practicing scales and exercises so that his fingers will be nimble, so that his ability to control his hands will be absolute, so that he can perform with the grace and brilliance that move all of the people that are sitting in front of him. You also must do this with your lives. All of us should become virtuosos. Every life is a concerto of God. God is the composer of human life, and every life is a concerto. In order for each one of us to play that concerto, we have to engage in these spiritual practices. We must have that perspective and understand what is a spiritual practice and what is practicing spirituality. A spiritual practice is playing the scale. Practicing spirituality is performing the concerto. Should our centers modify their usual way of doing things in bhajans in order to be more culturally sensitive in each country? Yes. In Australia, we are regarded by many as a cult. Should we be concerned about this? Yes. Let me tell you a story quickly. I know I'll never get through these questions, but now it's time for me to enjoy myself. I'm only kidding. I always enjoy myself when I'm with my brothers and sisters. One day there was a function in, I believe it might have been Ugadi, but not this year, but last year. There was a function in Whitefield, and the bhajan boys sang the bhajans, and then Swami gave a discourse. And then subsequent to the function, Swami had a trainee session. Now, a trainee session in Whitefield is when sometimes after Swami leaves, he will take some of the students into the veranda in the house, and along with the students, he will take some of the elders and some of the teachers. And those of us who have the good fortune are very, very fond of these informal times that we spend with Swami sitting in the veranda in the Whitefield house. In any case, after this function, Swami had a trainee session, and all the students and the bhajan boys were all called in, and several of us were called in, and some teachers and so forth. And then we all sit quietly, and then Swami comes down amongst us and comes and sits. And Swami looks around. Sometimes he'll point to somebody and say, stand up and speak. A student, an elder, anybody. Sometimes he'll have some of the boys sing bhajans. Sometimes Swami will speak. In any case, Swami was quiet for a long time, and then he looked at the bhajan boys sitting in front of him and he said, the bhajan boys are very bad. Now all of you know how dear to his heart the bhajan boys are amongst the group that Swami sometimes refers to as the nearer and dear. That is, it's in the worldly proximity sense of that expression. In any case, Swami said this somewhat ominously, the bhajan boys are very bad. And he was quiet for a moment, and then he explained. He said, we're here to this, we have just celebrated a function. Many people have come from many places. Many religions are there. many people from different countries, but you are singing only Sai bhajans. Only Sai bhajans. And all of these people are here from all of these different places and different religions. You are not understanding. Swami is universal. Now, need I say anything more? This is Swami talking to his own bhajan boys. There's an addendum I would add, and that is this. The organization will never impose a quota. You will sing so many English bhajans, French bhajans, German bhajans, Spanish bhajans, this bhajan, that, this language, Chinese bhajans. We will never impose quotas. You will sing so many bhajans, or you will sing bhajans that reflect the prevailing ethnic or religious group amongst you. We will never do anything like that. That's up to the devotees in each center to grow and understand and reflect the universality of Swami's message. That's up to each and every one of you that you should reflect that. That is your spiritual growth. If and when you reflect that and understand that Bhagavan Baba is here for this earth, and he plants his seed, as I think that man quoted me, somebody quoted me, I said something about planting a seed, but I say that over and over again. Swami plants his seed in all the lands of this world so that the divine tree may grow in the context of every culture amongst all people. He's here for the earth. He's here for humanity, not for any particular ethnic group, religious group, national group, no particular group. We should all understand that. There's a couple of questions about vegetarianism. Swami advocates vegetarianism. A few years back at a birthday function, Swami said, don't smoke cigarettes, don't drink alcohol, don't eat meat. He said it clearly and unequivocally and plainly and simply and directly and strongly. There was no mistaking what Swami said. Now, there was a question in here, should an office bearer remain an office bearer if he's not a vegetarian? Look, office bearers, if you accept the position of an office bearer, it means you're striving at least to provide some administrative leadership and hopefully to be an exemplar of sorts. The teachers, the Sathya Sai EHV teachers, understand that the most important aspect of teaching Sathya Sai EHV is to be an exemplar. In fact, actually, a teacher who is an exemplar of Satyadharma Shanti Prema himself could teach the children and elicit from the children these values that are intrinsic within them without even having the pedagogic formula of Sathya Sai EHV. By their very being, they would bring out these values. So, getting back to the vegetarian, I forgot I was going on talking about vegetarian. I've gone many miles and it's getting very late. If you are striving to be an exemplar, that is, if you accept the position of administrative leadership and you are striving to be an exemplar, after all, if you're accepting, even though you're not a spiritual advisor or guide, but you are having an administrative leadership position, you are highly visible. You are highly visible in a group that bears the name of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. If you are going to accept the responsibility and are willing to be highly visible, then God help you if you don't strive to be an exemplar. Be a vegetarian or resign. There's another question here about can we go to different gurus or go to listen to different masters or go to different spiritual leaders. Anyone can go anywhere, anytime, and do whatever they like. People who are office bearers in the Sathya Sai organization cannot. Swami has said office bearers in the Sathya Sai organization should be single-mindedly focused on this name and form. If you're not single-mindedly focused on this name and form, then don't accept the position to be an office bearer. You may still be a member of a center. You may still come and you may partake of all of the joy, bliss, and spiritual opportunity that prevails in all such a Sai centers. You may still do all of that, but don't accept the position of an office bearer if you're not single-mindedly focused on this name and form. And if you wish to go here and there, as Swami sometimes says, many people will go here, there, and everywhere. They dig a little bit of a hole, one place and another place like an ostrich, but they never dig deep enough to find the water. But I mean, some of us are not ready to do that. Some of us are not ready for that level of commitment, and that is good. Everyone is where they're supposed to be. Only don't accept the position of leadership in the Sathya Sai organization if you're not single-mindedly focused on this name and form. Set an example. I'm a leader in this organization. It bears Swami's name. I believe in Swami's divinity. Therefore, I'm not going here, there, and everywhere and setting a bad example so that other people will also follow. Development your youth are in the hands of youth leaders. As you said, selflessness and dedication are very important, plus competence. How do we manage when youth leaders are concerned with only competence and not with selflessness and dedication? In my country, the youth young adult is run by two separate teams, teen and youth coordinators. Should they not be one umbrella, young adults creating more diversity than unity? Advised. There is a need for clarification of this so-called youth movement. I attempted to address it in broad, general terms earlier when I spoke about youth. Right now, the prevailing definition of youth or young adults is 18 to 35, but I've heard 16 to 30, 16 to 35, 18 to 30, 18 to 55. It's not uniform, and we are working on that, and we will bring it all together in a way that's conducive to the greatest spiritual gain for all people. The youth, Swami is has emphasized greatly the importance of making the Sai organization amenable to the youth, bringing them in at every level. I alluded to that before. Helping them to take interest in this and to develop themselves so that they'll be capable of becoming the leaders of tomorrow. As I said before, in order to be the leaders of tomorrow, you have to be the participants of today, and we have to invite them. We have to create an environment that makes them feel welcome, that makes them feel loved, that makes them feel respected, and makes them feel acknowledged. But there cannot be autonomous groups of young people going off on their own, apart from the Sathya Sai organization, doing this, that, and whatever everywhere. That's inappropriate and unacceptable. There is no separate youth group apart from the Sathya Sai organization. The youth are part of the Sathya Sai organization. You might compare them to a wing, because I want to bring in youth leaders at every level, insofar as it's possible to do so. And we will do that. Swami is doing that in Prashanti Nidhi, and we will emulate what Swami is doing. But they're not separate from the Sathya Sai organization. It is very important for all of you to understand that. Also, the disparity in ages right now, if you took, for example, 16 to 35, you have high school children sitting in a group with 34-year-old PhDs who have 3 children. Now, there's a marked disparity in the social context of their lives, in the depth of their understanding of spirituality, and in their aspirations and their abilities. Obviously, this is not a homogeneous group. This is not a group that's conducive to the development of all of these young adults in the best possible way. We have to address these things, and we will do that. But meanwhile, I'm hopeful that at least the general remarks I made earlier, there'll be mutual understanding and love and respect between the elders and the young adults. The young adults, we will all recognize that they are indeed precocious, they're wonderful, and they're ingenious. Many of the technological things that we've seen at this conference were all created by the youth and developed by the youth. But the youth and budgeons or participate in the study circles are something more than old fogies. As one old fogey to another, the youth must be respectful. Here's a question, it's a suggestion about bringing the Red Cross in the Buddha Party and working with them in various projects. Recently, Swami had a group of overseas devotees. It was subsequent to a service conference, and Swami had me ask him some questions that had been very prevalent on the minds of the participants in the service conference. One of the questions was, can devotees participate in service projects in conjunction with other humanitarian organizations? And I posed this question to Swami and explained to Swami that many devotees were doing that and that they were, it was on many people's minds. And Swami answered very simply, in my view, no. Those were Swami's words. It is Swami's view not to do that. Now, does that mean that you should suddenly and abruptly terminate any relationship that you might have with a highly reputable, respected humanitarian organization, leaving them in alert, so to speak, if they've come to depend on your abilities or contributions? Absolutely not. You should be responsible and act appropriately and respectfully because they've given you an opportunity to render service. But gradually, we amongst ourselves should provide an opportunity for all devotees to come together in a meaningful way and perform selfless service. First within. After developing ourselves within, we are capable of going out into the world and acting as Swami's devotees and performing activities and performing as a group bearing his name. That's very important. Tomorrow I was going to talk about that a little bit as well. What is selfless service? I heard some excellent answers in that conference. In my view, selfless service is perfect empathy. Perfect empathy is perfect identification. Perfect identification is selfless love. When you can look at the person that is, there's no separation between the server and the served one. That is selfless service. Selfless service is not creating some catchy name for a group of people to come together and be led by someone who may bring them, who may have some connection with some government authority or some municipality and enable them to get into some kind of a project that will be helpful to some people who have a need that has to be filled, but they won't have the foggiest idea of selflessness, and they'll have absolutely a negligible experience of selflessness. They will go and do this working together. There may be a esprit de corps, there may be some joy and happiness in this, and it's not bad, but it is not spiritual service. This is not what Swami is talking about. We should all understand that. That's very important. It's subtle. There's more about the dress. I think we've done enough about that. Too many rituals are carried out in Sai centers. Is this appropriate? No. What should we do to Sai leaders who go against the rules and regulations of the Charter? With regards to officers, if a group of devotees feel that any given officer is not performing their function or is doing something unholy or unbelievable or unacceptable or inappropriate, the organization has created a hierarchy of recourse. A devotee in a center who feels that some center officer is abusive should go to the center president. If the center president happens to be the officer, they can go to the coordinating committee. If the coordinating committee cannot resolve it, they can go to the central council. If the central council cannot resolve it, they can go to the central coordinator. If the central coordinator cannot resolve it, they can go to the zone chairman. If the zone chairman cannot resolve it, they can come to me. That's another purpose for the organization, that there should be some recourse, so that hopefully And hopefully, Swami has always said, I was sitting in the in one of the workshops, and I think it was Lorraine said, clap your hands, and then she said, now put one hand down, and now there's no clap. Now clap your hands, and you can't with both hands coming together. And she was using it in the benign sense, showing that people have to come together, I believe. Isn't that true, Lorraine? Also, Swami says, conflict. You can't do conflict like this. Conflict is like this. There are two sides to conflicts. Conflicts are two hands coming together. Swami says, contain conflict, resolve conflict amongst yourselves, keeping it small. Don't let it grow. Don't give it power. Don't make it bigger than it is. Remember that you're devotees. Remember that you're God. Love one another. Come together and resolve your differences. You shouldn't have to engage in climbing the hierarchy of recourse. You shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to resolve all these things either between individuals or within your own immediate side family. But nevertheless, it is there, so that there's always a recourse for resolution of any problem whatsoever. What are your views views of receiving donations from certain agencies like the tobacco company? I don't know if they're being facetious. I assume this is perhaps it's a facetious question. Obviously that's inappropriate, but it gives me the opportunity to say my views about receiving donations from any agency, corporation, organization of any kind, anywhere, anytime is absolutely inappropriate. Do not solicit donations. Maybe I shouldn't say so absolutely. I guess there probably could be extenuating circumstances in certain situations with regards to schools and other projects. I know there are some small exceptions, but in general terms, we never solicit donations, ever. There's no solicitation of money, ever. And for the most part, we do not accept funds from any organization for any purpose. If we want to do selfless service in the name of Sai, why are so many of us still holding bhajans, chanting mantras, etc. during service activities? Thus projecting the whole project as work of a religious group or cult. Can there be a standard guideline on these issues? There will be standard guidelines, and there are many questions about guidelines. With regards to the various practices and programs that we have in the Sai organization, I think I already answered that question. With regards to cult, understand what Swami has said. And in fact, I certainly will say this tomorrow in the public meeting. The Sathya Sai organization is not a cult. Swami himself has said, I am not your guru. Your conscience is your guru and your master. Follow your conscience. He said that many, many times in many places. That there is no cult. What are the basic do's and don'ts of devotees in relationship to the organization, especially when the center is full of politics? What are the various do's? If the center is full of politicking, then the center is not functioning properly. Then if you perceive that the center is full of politicking, you should talk to the president of the center. And if you don't get satisfaction, you should engage in seeking recourse through the hierarchy that I described. The center should not have any politics. There are a lot of questions here about the selection process. Selection versus election also that brings to mind. Swami has said there should be selection, not election. Election is a contest of personalities. We're attempting to transcend these personalities and this fixation on these identities. So how can we have election of officers? It has to be a selection process. Ideally, we should all come together in divine knowledge of who amongst us can fulfill responsibilities of whatever position is at question, and we should all know, it should be self-evident. That would be the ideal if that were true. That would be Swami speak in our hearts, speaking to each and every one of us, and we would all have the same answer. Since all of us do not have that degree of access, because we're all at different levels of spiritual evolution and understanding and depth of understanding and degrees of wisdom, then we have differences of opinion. But we should be able to solve these lovingly, peacefully, harmoniously, and we should be able to select, not elect. It's important to understand, for example, in selection processes that I've conducted in various countries, I always incorporate and in fact solicit the will of the people. I ask all of the people to tell me, that is to write, to nominate whom they would prefer to be in any particular office. I'm talking about all the people in every center. They're able to do that, and we tabulate these things, and I look at them. And then I seek the counsel of all of the elders in that particular organization, the past president, the current president, the other officers, and other people who are highly respected, and I seek all of their opinions. And more often than not, the opinions of the elders, the past officers, and the current officers, and the will of the people will be very congruent. And then, when there are some differences, or when there are some close calls, so to speak, then I interview these people, and I inject my own feeling, my own intuition as to who would best serve the needs of the people at that given moment in that particular place. And it's selection, not election. The will of the people, of course, is incorporated, but it's not democracy, because I might find, after talking with this person, for example, if I happen to be the selector, I might find that the person has some idiosyncrasies or some problems or some situations that would preclude being an effective leader and being a good example. In which case, I would then go to the next person. I would do whatever I have to do to see to it that the people are served. Being totally impartial, or striving to be totally impartial as I approach the task. I don't know how, in such a small place, how I could possibly lose the glasses. So now I will use the eyes that I have instead of the glasses. So those people who wrote big will have their answer happen. Would you please indicate whether Sai Youth Camp should be open for adults to attend, even though national and key youth advisors are facilitating and present at the youth camp? Adult camps are open to the youth. Why shouldn't youth camps be open to the adults? Not only should they be open, but there should be youth advisors. In the United States, we have a system. We have 10 regions in the United States that comprise a central council. In each region, there's a young adult advisor, two for each region, a young adult male advisor, a young adult female advisor. These are the young adults themselves. And there is also an elder male advisor and an elder female advisor. Consequently, there are 40 people constituting the young adult administrative system under the central council. And there's an executive body of 3 people. This is appropriate. There should be, the young adults should be working harmoniously in their own governance with the adults and the elders in the organization. So obviously anything that you should do should be open to everyone. In fact, it should not be held under the name of Sai if it is not open. This is inappropriate that there should be any youth activity exclusive to the youth only and not permitting elders and other people to attend. Okay, national education systems. The question is, can we, I guess the bottom line is, can we avoid using the name Sai in going into public schools, because some of the public schools might not accept the Sathya Sai Education and Human Values program. Dr. Paldal referred to the Pushanti Task Force, of which he is a member. A task force has been formed of the eminent educators, Sai educators in the world, They are sending their deliberations to Professor Venkat Raman, a member of the former Vice Chancellor of the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning and a member of the Prashanti Council. All of these views are being taken into consideration, and we will have one understanding of Educare, Sathya Sai EHV, Sai Spiritual Education, Balavikas, how, what, when, where, why, and how. All of this will be clearly defined, and insofar as it is culturally independent, it will be uniform. Once and for all, we will do that. If it's the last thing that I do, we will do that, and it may well be the last thing that I do. How and when bad karma can be completely removed and save human beings? It's a question about karma. I think we should really, it's important to understand karma. First of all, Swami has said about self-realization, he said there are 4 factors that determine when we achieve self-realization. Our faith in God, our yearning to know Him, our karma, and the grace of God. Now, karma is, karma people think of as cause and effect, but realize that it's, look at it in a broad perspective. The circumstances of your birth, where you were born, your race, your religion, your nationality, your parents, the situation, the context of your life, all of these things are a result of your karma. You're born into a situation that is the most conducive situation for you to atone for your past transgressions and earn the rewards of those great noble deeds that you've done in the past. Those are the circumstances of your birth. And they are also, the circumstances of your birth are also the most conducive for you to achieve self-realization, the fulfillment of this human life that you have. That's very important, a very important aspect of karma that's often overlooked. So don't worry about the past. Be here now and do what you can so that you will progress spiritually, and that is what you must focus on. Here's an important question. Are you told in high regards the youth leaders of a particular place? We have conflicting direction from Prashanti, especially mixing teenage youth, male and female. That's what this is about. Whether young adults, male and female, should work together, be together. No, they should not. Absolutely not. Swami would never tolerate this. I'm telling you, if Swami saw some of the things that are taking place now, Swami would be very unhappy with all of us. I just got through saying to you about the separation of men and women sitting in the center. And Swami said, this is not Indian culture, this is spirituality. So if that applies to men and women sitting in a Sathya Sai center, does not apply 10 times or 100 times more to young adults? Obviously it does, for obvious reasons. This is not a social interaction, not for young adults, and not for elders, and not for any of us. This is a spiritual movement, and we should conduct ourselves accordingly. How do you spread God consciousness among non-believers of God? By your own exemplary being. Be an exemplar. That is the greatest service that you can render. And I don't say that in detriment, because there's another question in here, and I don't know if I'll get to it, about should we, instead of standing up in front of a lectern and giving a lecture to people and pontificating and making a lot of platitudinous statements about this, that, and the other, and trying to inspire people, should we not be out there in the field, leading them onward and in various service activities in the community? Well, there's something to say to that point of view. We should be engaged in service. There are many kinds of service. what I'm telling you is there's quality of service. Swami says always, quality first, quantity second. Quality of service is very, very important. I've already explained to you what selfless service is. Swami has explained it on a number of occasions. It's the quality of the service is everything. It determines whether or not you benefit spiritually and whether or not the person that's the recipient of your service benefits spiritually. We're here to demonstrate and be living examples of the divine teachings of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. In the context of service, you must first go within yourself, and you must have some understanding of your own purpose and identity before you're capable of looking someone in the eye who is in need and identifying with them, loving them so much that there's no separation between you and them, not making any distinction, no condescension. Don't become grandiose, and don't become so blinded by enthusiasm because you get together in a group and find some place where you can go and put the name of Sri Sathya Sai, carry a flag and march down the street and do this, that, or the other. First, develop yourself spiritually. Then you'll be capable of rendering selfless service. Then you can carry that banner, and then you can engage in all of these activities. Would it be worthwhile looking into looking at bringing in a code of conduct or guidelines for office bearers? Absolutely. It's not only would it be worthwhile, I would say it is imperative that we do that. All of this is forthcoming. There are several questions here about the rules and regulations. Does the World Charter apply? The World Charter prevails right now. The countries have their own guidelines. The international rules, regulations, and the World Charter is going to be revised. I'm telling you now, we're in a process of revision. And it certainly will be revised by the 80th birthday, and it may well be the 80th birthday that it is presented at the Divine Lotus feet. There will be a revision. We will achieve that degree of uniformity that is absolutely essential and independent of cultural differences, because it must be so. If Swami is universal, if this is eternal truth, then how can we have such disparate views of who we are and what we should be doing? That is very, very important. Ask yourselves, look around the world. Perhaps some of you have had experience with various organizations in different parts of the world. You see really different programs, different views, different degrees of understanding of Swami's message, different practices. There's such a disparity, and it has nothing to do with different cultures. This is something apart from culture. So we will write guidelines that are effective and appropriate and that serve the devotees' needs and that enhance the organization, the cohesion of the organization, and it will be done by 80th birthday. There were many decisions and recommendations in the previous World Conferences. Have the decisions and recommendations been implemented? No, because many of these decisions, so-called decisions and recommendations, were regarded by some countries as decisions, some countries as recommendations, and some countries as suggestions. Furthermore, that disparity was exacerbated by the different understandings of these decisions, recommendations, or suggestions. So the answer is there has not been a uniform application of the prior decisions, recommendations, or suggestions that have been made in the former World Conferences. That will not be the case at the 80th birthday. That has created many problems, and that is the reason why we have so many differences. There's a thing about terms of office. Is it not true that 2-year terms for a chairperson of a center, that a chairperson of a center has a term of 2 years and it can be repeated once? That is true for Sai Centers. That is true for coordinating committees. That is true for central councils. However, often there will be exceptions to that rule. If and when you find a situation where there is not another person that can come forth that can fulfill the needs of that office, and all are in agreement and understand, then an exception can be made. That rule is not rigid. It is a good rule. It because it gives people an opportunity. But we don't want to create a vacuum or devolve because we have imposed this arbitrary rule of 2 years, which can be repeated once. We have to have a little bit of common sense. Many questions are asked about that. 2 years, 4 years. What I'm saying to you is that is the general rule, and then you have a selection. If the selection results in selecting the same person, and there really isn't anybody else that could fill that function, then be happy you have such a person. Celebrate. Don't worry about a rule. You must be the bird. One of the nine code of conduct is to speak no evil of others. How can we avoid that? Don't do it. Keep your mouth shut. I wish to God I'd followed my own advice all these years. We're almost done. I'm condensing many of these questions into a few, and I know that I've left out many questions and perhaps many points that were made. Many of the questions were excellent, and there were many important things that were brought to my attention. You will forgive me for those things that I have not answered or responded to. In many Sai centers, the Hindu religious festivals are celebrated with several rituals like yajnas, abhishekam. This practice virtually drives away aspirants from other religions, moreover carrying themselves as proponents of Hinduism. These centers are preventing Sai organization from being recognized as a spiritual movement by the government of many countries. Kindly advise us how this situation can be improved. This is not a religion. Swami says there is only one religion, the religion of love. There is only one God, He is omnipresent. Understand the meaning of omnipresence. Also, I will talk about that tomorrow. Omnipresence is not only a term that refers to God being everywhere, geographic omnipresence. Omnipresence is also temporal. God always was, is, and will be. Swami was Krishna, Swami was Rama, Swami was Jesus, Swami was Buddha. You have to think like that. Broad-minded perspective and understand there's only one God who ever has been, who is, and who ever will be. Therefore, these religions, all of these religions that were founded at different times during the course of human civilization, may appear to differ, but they differ in emphasis, not in essence. That is because the Lord took human form to inspire men to move away from the precipice of self-destruction during a particular time in the course of human civilization when there were particular problems and particular dangers. So naturally there'll be differences, apparent differences. The differences are superficial. The essence of all religions is one. And God always was, is, and will be one. Therefore, to combine, this is a spiritual movement, not a religion. To confine the practices of this spiritual movement to a reflection of only one religion is wrong. Don't do that. It's not good for you. Now, does that mean that, for example, let us say that a center is predominantly Hindu, that you should not respect, embrace, and love with all of your heart your own heritage and practice it and understand it and make it part of your life? Absolutely not. But go to a mandir and practice Hinduism. Understand that the Sai Center is a spiritual place. It is a place that incorporates all religions, recognizing that all the eternal truth, the basis of all religions, is one. All people of all religions, Christians may go to churches, Hindus may go to mandirs, Muslims may go to mosques, Jews may go to synagogues, but in the Sai Center, all are one. So don't confine the center to a litany of rituals and bhajans. that are all reflective of one religion. Start being more broad-minded. There is one caveat to this, and that is this, in my view. This is my view. The budgeons, let's talk about the budgeons, because that seems to be if there's a sore spot, that's probably one of them. Budgeons are an expression of adoration to God. You're singing His praise, you're singing His name. If you are unable to sing other budgeons and feel that in your heart, that love and that devotion, then don't change. You're not ready to change. But keep studying Swami's teachings and keep thinking about what Swami says and strive to understand, to have a broader perspective and to understand Swami's spiritual message. As your understanding deepens, as your love for Swami deepens, also your ability to see God in all of His forms will also become more and more evident to you. And as you do that, you are progressing, and you will change and be transformed. But don't detract from the love in the center abruptly, because it's universal. Somebody said, Swami's message is universal, so we'll abruptly change it. Don't do like that. Swami never does things like that abruptly in a way that causes trauma. But begin to have a broader perspective and realize that the centers must be universal in nature. This is what we're striving for. There's also a question about some of the youth activities, that they seem to be social activities, and they seem to be deteriorating in terms of their spiritual quality. Well, let's change that now. Henceforth, let's understand that the youth are part of the Sathya Sai Center, that the Sathya Sai Center is one aspect of a spiritual movement, and that all of their activities will be spiritual in nature, not social. Let us begin to understand that. Our activities that contribute to the upliftment of mind, body, and spirit, like Reiki, chakra healing, and others, all considered activities that are spiritual in the movement towards realizing Godhood. I can only comment on these activities in the context of the Sathya Sai organization. These activities are not part of the Sathya Sai organization, and should not be, and will never be, in fact. They may or may not be constructive. I am not qualified to comment on their constructivity. I don't know whether these things are valid or not. But I can tell you, on one occasion, somebody who was practicing Reiki, a leader in America, actually was using Swami's name. And I contacted him and I said, sir, this is not part of the Sathya Sai organization. Kindly, he had his name on a newsletter and was circulating a lot of literature using Swami's name with regards to his program. And he said, and his response was, and he was a sincere and a gracious man. He said, sir, my teacher, my Reiki teacher, has told me that she has talked to Swami, gotten Swami's blessings and approval for us to promulgate this program and to use his name. And to which I responded, I will determine the veracity of that. And if it is so, then I will apologize to you and wish you well. If it is not so, then I will ask you again, please remove the name. I did in fact present this to Swami, and I told Swami the story that I'm telling you now. And Swami said, no, that is not part of the Sathya Sai organization, should not be associated with Swami's name. Tell them to remove Swami's name. I did, and that man, who was a very good man, remove Swami's name from his literature and all of these things. So I'm telling you from one direct experience with Reiki itself, this is Swami's view. But all of these programs, all of these things that are spiritual, supposedly, or pseudo-spiritual, they have no place. What we do is clearly defined. We don't have to invent new things. We don't have to go and explore these things. So do that on your own, you, by all means, but don't make it part of the Sathya Sai organization and don't associate Swami's name with these kinds of things. Has Swami expressed anywhere at all that we must spread his message? Are we required to? Is it right for the Sai organization through its centers to move towards this end? With regards to these public meetings, Swami has in fact instructed these public meetings, that these public meetings be held. And as you're probably aware, a meeting was held in London, one was held in Rome, and one was held in Argentina just a couple of weeks ago. This meeting is taking place. Next Saturday there'll be a meeting in Los Angeles. Finally it'll end the following Saturday in New York. Those will be the 6 meetings prior to Guru Purnima. Swami himself has given this instruction. Is it because Swami wants us to make him famous, because he seeks name and fame? Absolutely not. What are we doing when we have a public meeting? We're standing up with self-confidence, credibility, dignity, and bearing witness to the truth. We benefit spiritually, and the people who hopefully, to the extent that we are authentic in our representations, also benefit. That is what we are doing. That is a spiritual interaction. We are not asking anybody to buy anything. We're not asking anybody to join any organization or do anything else. We're not asking anything from anybody. Hopefully, we're giving something of value. The Sai organization does not have to engage in these programs. Nobody is saying anything of the sort. However, there'll be opportunities to do this if you all come together and decide to have meetings at various levels. There will be arrangements for that. And hopefully, at least insofar as these meetings have been conducted in these other countries, there'll be examples, good examples. In Argentina, there was a theater for 3,000 people. 3,200 people came before they said we had to turn people away. The place was filled, and they were silent, and they wouldn't leave after it was over. So in Rome also, they were overwhelmed, and they were very, very happy. So the public meetings have had a good effect. And most importantly, in my view, because once Swami did this about 20 years ago or 22 years ago, there was something very similar, a series of public meetings in the United States. And in my view, it's much more for us than it is for the public, because we see ourselves standing up and saying who and what we are and what we believe, and hopefully we say it from our hearts and in a way that is authentic and communicative and articulate, and we reflect the confidence that we have in our own faith in Swami. I think that this is very, very important for all of us. It's certainly important for me, not just because I happen to be the guy standing up here talking, but it's important because I realize that this really is my life. I'm standing in front of a lot of people whom I don't know, and I'm saying, this is what I believe with all of my heart. And I know deep down in my heart that it is true. And that's very important for me, and it should be very important for all of us. How relevant are ritualistic religious practices, ceremonies, festivals in the Sai organization and the movement Godwards? I could say they're not. Actually, they have some place, but the place is really diminutive. I talked about this before. These are practices. This is not practicing spirituality. Furthermore, if they're all confined to one religion and to the detriment or the absence of representation of the other religions, then they're actually contraindicated, because you're subordinating the concept of universality, which is much more important than the spiritual value that will be derived from any given religious practice or spiritual practice of any religion. So please don't make the centers into anything like that. There are religious houses of worship for all of the religions to do that. Go there and do it. See, how is that Sai Center, especially new ones, are still using the term Shri when it is being discouraged? You know, Shri, S-R-I. What occurred to me the other day was, because this question came up again, Shri is S-R-I, and in London, or in King Arthur's Round Table, there was Sir Lancelot, S-I-R. A knight of the realm is Sir this and Sir that. And even though in America we don't have any knights, or in France, well, not France, the European countries, many of them have knights, but in Venezuela they don't have any knights, but they acknowledge somebody who is called Sir whatever. Okay? By the same token, Shri is a term that denotes respect, stature. It denotes our attitude and acknowledgement of that person, of the importance of that person, of their stature. There's no harm in using Shri. You may or may not. It is not necessary, but it is also not bad to use Shri. That is not bad. That is not against the rules of the organization. It's when you do things that give the impression that the organization is a function of one religion and one religious practice that we have detriment. Using the term Shri is not detriment. This will be the last thing, and again, it's organizational. There are three topics. I won't go into all of them. One, oversee Sathya Sai organization structure. 2, Sai World Charter. And 3, funds management. All of you know the structure. I don't have to reiterate what the structure is. You know the structure that currently exists, I believe. Regarding the Sai World Charter, I've already told you that the rules, regulations, international rules, regulations, and the Sai World Charter will be revised, and I told you why and how. Regarding funds management, we have no solicitation of funds. We never have. Many years ago, Jack Hislop asked Swami, what is the most important thing to do? What is the most important consideration in the Sathya Sai organization? And Swami said, have as little to do with money as possible. All of you have heard that over and over and over. Let us adhere to that. I understand that we engage in projects that require funding, but we must do it in this sattvic manner. So, I think there's nothing else to answer here on these questions. I want to tell you that all of you, I'm deeply moved by what I've seen in these workshops and by all of the questions that I've read. And there were so many questions. I regret that I failed to cover many of the points. But this is a very, very happy Sai family. This is Zone 3 and the Singapore Sai family. And all of the devotees who worked here and provided the hospitality for all of us have been extraordinarily gracious. They've been selfless, dedicated, and competent. And I'm delighted and very, very